Hey everybody, Rich here back from HFX Gaming Memories, and thank you for joining us for our latest episode. If you're new to the channel, here's the brief rundown. This isn't just a channel where we talk about retro gaming. I actually want to hear from you, the audience, and get some participation and dialogue going. Like many of you, I follow a lot of gamers on YouTube, and I really wish I could join in their conversations when they're telling stories, but that's not the way the medium works. So I designed this channel to hear from you, the viewer, and include you in it. So whether it's emailing us, hitting us up on Twitter, or comments, I want to hear about games before we review them so I can include your stories. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to the latest episode. Today, we are actually going to be doing something we haven't done since our first episode. We're going to be reviewing just a single game. I wanted to go back to doing some simplistic reviews so I can get a better turnaround time for our viewers. Today, we are going to be talking about Jackal for the Nintendo Entertainment System. I'll be honest, I haven't played this game since the first time I played it, probably back in '94, and I really wanted to revisit it. So, my story about Jackal starts, as I said, in 1994. My friend Greg, who I've known for over 30 years now, give or take, had just recently moved to the neighborhood. You know what? That math doesn't line up at all. Ignore that. But anyway, Greg had moved to the neighborhood, and back in the 90s, the way you made friends was, well, this kid plays video games, he plays video games, I know a little bit of codes, he knows some, automatically that makes you friends. So we actually bonded over Mortal Kombat because we were really starting to get into that 16-bit era. Of course, teenage years were coming, so you needed to play those more mature games. But occasionally we'd break out the old Nintendo, and again, when you had a new friend, it was great to see what games they had, trade around. One of the games he had was Jackal, and this is actually probably the original cartridge that he owned, so I still have it. I vaguely remember playing the game. I knew it had jeeps, and it was very similar to games like Guerrilla Warfare. And I remember it being difficult and being quite fun, so I thought, you know what? Let's revisit that. So, let's get into Jackal. The plot for Jackal is pretty simple and easy to follow, and actually kind of reminds me of Rambo too. There are POWs trapped behind enemy lines, and it's your job as soldiers to go in and rescue them. Now, they actually give you the names of these 4 soldiers, which is a little strange because you pretty much just play as a Jeep in this game. The only time you actually see the soldiers are these still frames in between levels where somebody's yelling, "Here!" and showing you a map. So, let's look at the gameplay. You have a primary and secondary attack in this game. The primary attack is just a machine gun. What's really difficult is that the gun always just shoots upward. You actually can't change what direction the machine gun shoots regardless of the orientation of your Jeep. The secondary attack starts out as a grenade. By rescuing flashing POWs, you actually get weapons upgrades. First to a missile, then a missile that spreads in 4 directions. Be honest, they actually all do the same amount of damage, and really there's certain levels where you actually want to have the level 1. The grenades actually can be lobbed over walls, bunkers, whereas the missiles cannot. However, that missile spread is really useful on bosses or even just trying to traverse this bridge. You can see the Medusa heads with their heat-seeking missiles are really difficult to get by, and the spread actually allows you to take it out before you get to them. In the arcade, there's actually an additional upgrade. I actually couldn't get all 4 upgrades. I found it so difficult. There's one that actually explodes all around you. One thing I do like about the arcade version is when you die, you actually only go down 1 level in terms of upgrades. If you have the top of the line missiles for the Nintendo version and get hit, well, you're going back down to the grenades. Jackal has 6 levels in total, and at the end of each level you're actually going to take on a large boss. Now, in the Nintendo version, after you defeat the boss, there's a little cutscene with the still frame that I mentioned earlier. The arcade game is just continuous. The first level sees you taking on a desert combat zone, and then you're going to battle some small tanks at the end. This is a really good introduction level. It gives you an idea of what you're going to do. You're going to get POWs, get into the helipad, and continue on the battle. That's pretty much what the entire game is, and you know what? It doesn't get monotonous. One thing I have to say about this game is the music is very repetitive, but yet it doesn't get on your nerves like some games. It just seems to be very fitting, and it's very similar to the arcade, so I have to say they did an excellent job porting over the music. The second level sees you going to Greece. It's got a really nice design to it, and there's a lot of mythology in it. These Medusa heads are really hard to take on just as general bad guys, and this is where you're really going to want to have those level 4 missiles on this bridge. Where I really struggled in this game was level 2. I couldn't believe how difficult these Medusa heads were. I actually lost almost every single life I had on these. I actually managed to get through it with only 1 life left on my first playthrough. I couldn't believe how relentless they were. Level 3 sees you actually going to an enemy base and taking on a large ship at the end. What was really interesting was the ship was a lot easier than the Medusa heads. There's definitely not a linear difficulty in the bosses, and they seem to swap around quite a bit, which is very different for video games. You think that the further you got into it, the game would actually increase in difficulty in terms of bosses, but it was quite the opposite. Level 4 sees you starting out in kind of a marsh, so it adds a bit of difficulty in that your Jeep just doesn't go as fast. Add in these heat-seeking missiles and it definitely layers on the difficulty. I had a lot of trouble trying to avoid these on my second playthrough. The 5th level actually takes you to a rocky terrain base where you're going to be actually taking on tanks and a base. I couldn't help but feel this was like a Transformer where you had these tanks coming out of these bays and you had to take out these guns. I was just waiting for it to turn into Metroplex. Not overly difficult if you have the right guns, but there definitely is a lot of maneuverability. There's so many bullets coming at it that you really have to be on your toes for this level. The final level sees you taking on a military compound. This is the Stronghold. There actually is a large base and you're going to have to take out the guns. Once you take down the base, a large tank comes up. I expected this to be really difficult because it has two styles of attack. The cannon shoots a large flamethrower, but it really is easy to move around it because it doesn't shoot while moving. The secondary gun has a bit of a spread action, and I could really figure out the pattern quite quickly and had no trouble taking this down whatsoever. When I asked for stories about Jackal, I only received one from my friend Ben Savage, and no, that's not the guy from the Wonder Years, and I'm not trying to be funny, just want to put that out there. So I really appreciate hearing his stories. He said, "Rich, one thing I really remember about Jackal, other than being a lot of fun, was it was difficult." And you know what? He was not wrong. I actually don't remember the game being that difficult, but maybe we played with a Game Genie and I just blocked out how hard it actually was. It definitely is difficult, but it's not cheap. The first thing I have to say what made it difficult is that there are one-hit deaths, which Konami just loves. Regardless of what's hitting you, it's an instant death. So if it's a soldier on the ground with a rifle, a tank, a submarine, or a missile, you're going down with a single hit. You only start out with 4 lives, and I actually found out you only have so many continues when I got to the last level, which resulted in me in having to start the game all over again so I could see what the final boss was. There is a code to get more lives. You have to play 2-player, and just as the second player dies, hit A and B. It takes a lot of coordination, but it's one way you can definitely get through it. With the single deaths, there's also barrages of bullets everywhere, so you have to be really quick with your fingers. The Jeep can go in 9 different directions, and I will say the Nintendo did a much better job in terms of maneuverability, at least compared to the main version I tried for the arcade. Maybe it's easier with a joystick, but trying this on the arcade, I kept getting the Jeep stuck and I could barely move this thing. Something I mentioned earlier was the non-linear boss difficulty. I couldn't believe how hard the second boss was, the Medusa heads, but yet the ship was no problem, same with the Metroplex looking base. It really should have been a little bit more linear, but that's kind of nitpicking stuff. I didn't mind that, it just added a little bit of a challenge and some breathing space within the game. I will have to say what really started to make the game difficult and kind of bugged me was that the screen didn't scroll perfectly. I always found I was right near the edge, and as soon as an enemy would appear, I would have an instant death. I couldn't see what was actually coming at me. So even if I backtracked and then tried to move the screen forward, I would get hit by these turrets or some of these trucks that sought multiple bullets. The boss battles definitely are the hardest part of the game, and it's where I lost the majority of my lives outside of those scrolling issues. There's a really noticeable lack of hit detection. I couldn't actually tell if I was hitting the weak spot on the boss or not. There was no flashing, there was no different sound effects, so I spent a lot of time hitting this enemy and not sure if I was doing actual damage or not. So that is one thing I would have liked to see them improve on, but other than that, the game plays really well. I would definitely rate this game a good 4 out of 5, and it's something I'll probably go back when I have friends over and do a little bit of Retro Night multiplayer. Well everybody, that's it for Jackal. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed playing the game again. It definitely brought back a lot of memories. So, what are we going to do next? Well, it's the end of the month, and like many of you, I've been eating very healthy back at the gym after a long holiday, and I decided I'm going to go to McDonald's and treat myself to a meal. And you will not believe what toy I got in the bag this time. Well, I guess we have our next video. We're going to be looking at McKids. So make sure you subscribe, put your comments and stories below, hit us up on Twitter at hfxgamingmemory, or email me at hfxgamingmemories@gmail.com. Until then, stay safe, keep gaming.